the regular meeting of the Dickinson City Commission for Tuesday, February 16th, 2021. The records show we're missing one commissioner, Vice President Frederick. First item up is the order of business. Mr. Winningham, are there any changes to the order of business?
Mr. President, this time there was no changes to the order of business.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions on the order of business? Not, I'd look for a motion on the order of business.
So moved.
Motion to approve the order of business.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Oderman, second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion? All in favor of the order of business as presented, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to speak to? Not, I'd look for a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Commissioner Walla,
Second.
second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. You have a couple of items on the 5 o'clock timetable this evening. We'll move right into administration and finance. And our first item up is we have a Dickinson Historic Preservation, Historic Places presentation, and that'll be brought to us by Museum Director Furman. Good evening.
Good evening, President Decker, Commissioners. Today I'm coming here to follow up on a formal request that the Historic Preservation Commission made to the Commission, requesting the permission to place local historic markers on 2 city buildings that have been designated as local landmarks. This is a program that the Historic Preservation Commission is just pushing forward. You'll remember I came somewhat earlier this year giving you a little bit of background on that. So this is a formal request to actually place those. There's really no protocol that's been established for this. I just think it's a really good idea to keep the commission in the loop, and we also get a chance to do it publicly and bring a little bit more attention to the Historic Preservation Commission's work. The other buildings, there's another 9 buildings that are actually local landmarks. We'll be moving forward to actually mark those as well with the same types of markers as were shared with the request. So tonight I hope to ask for your formal blessing to mark both Fire Station Number 1 and the Dickinson Public Library building.
All right, thank you, Mr. Furman. Any questions for Mr. Furman on placement of these plaques?
Mr. President.
Mr. Oderman?
Mr. Furman, where on the buildings do you guys plan on putting this? Just on the facade? Is it going to be in a similar place on each of them, or?
We'll look for a similar place on the front facade of each building, although actually the public library is a special case because what's now considered the front facade is not the historic side. And maybe you might have noticed on our logo, we actually use the front door of the public library as a logo for the commission. It's just really more proper to mark that on the historic side, so we would put it near that doorway. And as with every building that we plan to mark, we will talk to the owners and get their agreement on where it should be placed. For instance, one of the other buildings that is both a local landmark and a National Register property is the Stark County Courthouse. That one may actually be more effectively marked with a sign that's mounted on a post further away from the building, because a small 18-inch plaque is going to get lost on a large building like that. But we'll approach them kind of as a case-by-case basis, but certainly on these 2, we want them on the front facades, the original facade in the case of the library.
Do we have anything else like this in Dickinson right now, or would this
No,
be
sir.
the first thing of this kind?
These would be the first ones that are marked. The original local landmark program started in 2009. We added the first new building to the group last year with Fire Station Number 1. And the commission, we've discussed quite a bit about ways to make our citizens aware of our historic built resources, and we thought that small plaques like this would be a good start.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, something like this, you can establish some kind of walking tour when you have enough of these up, and it's great.
You must be psychic or something. So that is the type of thing that we are looking to do. The historic downtown has a plethora of historic buildings that should be marked.
A lot of hidden gems of buildings, and especially if you go into the interior and do a little exploring, you'd be surprised what's in some of the buildings downtown.
Truly.
You could keep yourself pretty busy during Rough Rider days doing walking tours for people that are coming
Surely.
back to town. Yeah.
I've done a couple when we did we hosted the Certified Local Governments Conference April before last, and did one. It went over really, really well. Just about 14 or 15 of the downtown historic buildings went over really good.
No, this is great. Yeah, thank you for doing this.
Sure thing.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Furman? Not, I'd look for a motion.
I'll move to approve the placement of signs on these two historic buildings.
We have a motion by Commissioner Soboluk to approve placement of the plaques on the public library and fire station number 1.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. Are there any other questions, comments for Mr. Furman or staff? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next item up is a Chapter 29 amendment, and this will be presented by our HR coordinator, Mrs. Nominuk.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. The reason for the changes before you in the Chapter 29 mostly was to clarify some of the some of the items that are maybe not as clear as we thought they were, for consistency in some of the wording, and then some things that have been changed to some of our benefits. Already the changes have been made, we just haven't changed the wording in our Chapter 29. And then one of the big changes, or one of the main changes, was to change the firefighter work period from 27 days to 18 days. So I'll just go through the changes in here. You can see them listed in red. But if you look on page 1, we changed the word currently to shall. The Civil Service Commission shall consist of 5 members. And then below that, employee status, again, it was changing the wording for the firefighter work period to 18 days rather than 27 days. And then just some cleanup here. An employee who is employed by the city to work in a civil service position will require the employee to work at least 40 hours per week on a regular basis. That's just to clarify. And then the regular part-time, and the wording for regular part-time was already there, and we just wanted to clarify the regular full-time to be consistent with the same type of wording. And then if you switch over to page 3, again, we're clarifying that standard work period for the fire department. They'll work 136 hours in a defined 18-day work period. And, just for your information, with the firefighters, and Chief Presnell is here as well to clarify if you have any questions, but excuse me, it is not changing their pay. It is just changing their work period. If you have any questions, I'm sure he could clarify right now.
There is some additional overtime with this new planned pay schedule or work schedule that we approved, I think, for the budget.
Yes, we eliminated Kelly days.
Right.
So yeah, that still applies with the change to the change schedule.
Does it break down to 8 or 12 hours of overtime per pay period?
It goes down to, I believe, 8.
8, okay.
Yes.
Okay, then on page 5, we changed the number 14 to write out the word 14 for the work period for licensed police officer. Again, we clarified the 136 hours in a defined 18 work period for overtime for the firefighters. Page 6, because now we have a timekeeping program, we've changed the wording that every employee must digitally approve rather than sign their timesheet to verify all entries are accurate. So that was the only reason for that change. On page 7, after the adoption of such pay plan, it said no class shall be assigned a higher than maximum. It should be no position shall be assigned a higher than maximum or lower, so I was just clarifying that incorrect wording there. On page 9, at the bottom, we implemented a new benefit to our health insurance a while back here where we're giving credit to employees for years of service. So for every 5 years of service, the city pays an additional 2.5% of the employee portion of their health insurance, and that had not been changed yet in our Chapter 29. So we're just updating that. Page 10, change the word from is to may be. The 20% portion of the coverage which the employee pays may be deducted from their paycheck as a pre-tax benefit. And then we just changed the word on 18.4, employee paid medical flexible spending account instead of medical/dental benefit expense benefit, just to clarify that it's not just medical and dental. They can be using it for prescription, vision, those type of things as well. And then we added in the word qualifying, to pay for qualifying medical dental bills. At the bottom of that page, 18.7, we changed it again to medical flexible spending account. And this is a change that the city made a while back. We used to pay $450 towards the employees, for every full-time employee, for a medical flexible spending account. And now the city gives $250. And that would be for anyone who averages at least 40 hours a week. And then on the next page, it talks about it being prorated for those permanent part-time eligible employees. So again, that's a change that's been in effect. We just hadn't changed the wording. And then we'll skip over to page 25. Under rules for reporting off work due to sickness, we took out the nature of the illness and disability. That's not something that the employee has to tell their supervisor, just their expected length of absence. And then at the bottom of page 26, if an employee is collecting benefits from an approved workers' compensation claim, the employee may use, it said sick leave, but they can really use any type of available leave. It doesn't have to be sick leave. Page 27, benefit payout to terminating employee. This is just to clarify, we have what we call personal leave. And that was not clarified in here. We tell everyone how we pay out our sick leave and how we pay out our vacation leave when they term, but there was nothing to clarify personal leave. So it's just to clarify that we pay out at 1/4 of their hourly rate. And page 32, just was a highlight there that I wanted to take out. Page 33, there was an exception to Family Medical Leave Act and military leave. At the top, military leave needs to be added into that. And that's the end of the changes. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Nominack. Any questions for Mrs. Nominack on the amendments to Chapter 29?
Shelley, I noticed under the flex spending account, you still have medical and dental in the description. Now I can find it. Qualifying
Yes,
medical
I see
dental
that.
bills. Just clean that up, maybe.
Yep.
Are there any other comments or questions for Mrs. Dominic on Chapter 29 amendments? This is ordinance 1709.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman,
I'd move to approve first reading of this ordinance.
we have a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 1709 by Commissioner Oderman,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further questions or comments? I would just advise that commission, we all read through this again and see if there's anything that we see that jumps out. Sometimes it's just good to have a lot of eyes looking at documents like this, so. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Our next item up, Mr. Maury with our monthly financial report. Good evening.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. For our first financial report of 2021, you can see on our treasurer's report there hasn't been any major changes since the last time I presented. In December of 2020, we're at about 66.1 million, so we're up just a little over 500,000 since the last time we had these numbers given to you. As far as our investments go, you can see those did jump up a little, and the reason for that is after our retirement board meeting in January, we did make our full budgeted pension contributions for 2021. So those are all in those updated numbers. So starting with our 1% sales tax, so the blue line is everything that we collected in 2020. The one red dot on the far left is our first collection in 2021. So you can see in January it was 443,000. So we're down about 134,000 from January of 2020, so about a 23% decrease for our first collection in our 1% sales tax.
And Mr. Maury, just to remind of the general public, that is 2 months behind.
That's correct, President Decker.
So January is actually what we collected in November of last year.
Yes, President Decker, that's absolutely correct. And then also to point out to the public as well, so this 0.5% sales tax slide, we collect our sales tax as one lump sum, but we collect it in two separate funds when it gets into our account. So this is exactly half of the previous slide. On our hospitality tax, so again, the blue line is 2020, and that red dot on the far left. So you can see we're about 69,000 for our first collection in 2021. So down about 13,000 from January of 2020, about a 16% decrease from the prior year. And then in our occupancy tax, again, down a little bit. We're down about $3,500 from January of 2020. So it's about a 15% decrease in our occupancy tax. And also to remind the public, our occupancy tax, we take a 0.5% administration fee out of, and then the rest is paid directly to the Dickinson Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then our next slide is our oil impact revenue. So starting out the year, you can also see as well, we're down a little over 250,000 in our oil impact collections, so about a 23% decrease there. We did forecast about $9 million to start the year. In 2020, we forecasted the same, ended up finishing the year about $11.2 million. If we continue to collect around $900,000 for the remainder of the year, we'd finish at just under 10.9 million. And then the final thing I'd like to mention to the public and to the commission, to stay within compliance with the North Dakota Century Code, you'll get a one more year-end report for 2020 at the next commission meeting at the beginning of March. So you'll receive that packet before the next meeting.
Maury, with the oil impact revenue, does that trail also?
Yes, that's correct. That's my understanding is all these collections coming from the state treasurer's office are on a 2-month lag.
Any questions for Mr. Maury or any of the staff on the monthly financial report? There are no questions. I'd look for a motion on the monthly financial report.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Walla,
Second.
second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item up, we have a Main Street Initiative proclamation and action plan. This will be handled by Deputy City Administrator Carlson.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. For the city's opportunity to apply for the Main Street Initiative grant program, we are looking at updating our comprehensive plan. And for that, we would need to declare a proclamation of our Main Street Initiative and then the action plan that we plan on looking at our targeted dates to improve our city through the governor's initiative. So with that, I would ask the President to be able to read our proclamation and approve the action plan.
I'll go ahead and read this. The City of Dickinson, North Dakota Proclamation, Main Street, North Dakota Initiative. Whereas the City of Dickinson has made a commitment to developing a healthy, vibrant community through fiscally responsible planning and attracting the talent needed to support our growing economy. And whereas this development has included actively working to enhance the quality of life for residents through new and diverse projects and enhance walkability. And whereas innovative partnerships and planning have led to more efficient development in infrastructure. And whereas the City of Dickinson is committed to increasing the amount of community programming to expand resident and visitor experiences to increase vibrancy in the city. Now therefore I, Scott Decker, by virtue of the authority vested in me as President of the City of Dickinson, on behalf of the entire City Commission and the Dickinson community, do hereby proclaim on April 4th, 2021, the City of Dickinson joined the Governor's Main Street Initiative and be known as the Main Street, North Dakota community. I'll correct that, the date on there. It's actually April 4th, 2018. I amended that. So it is, I do hereby proclaim that as of or on April 4th, 2018, we became part of that. Let this proclamation support the continued success and efforts of our commission, staff, businesses, and residents in creating a vibrant, engaged community. And I would look to City Commission for a motion on this proclamation.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve this proclamation by Commissioner Soboluk.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion? All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. I will sign this. I'll hand this down to Mrs. Soboluk. She'll get it to Mr. Winningham, and we will get that in and move forward. Mrs. Carlson, did you want to talk about the action plan any, or?
I can state a couple other
Okay.
things for it. For that action plan, what it is on April 4th, 2018, the governor made his visit. We initiated that we would become a Main Street Initiative. And through the grant program, there's 3 pillars that the governor is asking that we meet, or meet a portion of it. The 3 pillars are the 21st century workforce, smart, efficient infrastructure, and healthy, vibrant communities. As we put in our projects for our action plan, we actually hit all 3 pillars to make us a community champion. So that's why we are asking for approval of the action plan so that we can go forth with our proclamation on the grant program.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Carlson. And just for the general public's information on us seeking this grant money for our, to update our comprehensive plan. Mr. Winningham, you had at one point talked to some of our concerns about the comprehensive plan, just for the general public, why we need to update this comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. So as part of the City of Dickinson's comprehensive plan that was first initiated and completed in 2013 and implemented really around the 2014 time frame, it was during a boom cycle within our community. The comprehensive plan has given us a future that at this point we know that there are some things that need to be adjusted. And so part of those adjustments is our population, our city services, and all the things that affect citizens at large, or how we approach the future development for the City of Dickinson. And so this comprehensive plan review will allow us to set better measurements and give us better goals and vision for the Commission to adopt that'll allow our citizens then to somewhat make better decisions on how our city will be developed in terms of land, in terms of platting, and how we can provide better services to the citizens. And that's how this comprehensive plan will be updated, with those thoughts in mind.
And it just gives us as a commission better information to the planning and zoning and a multitude of other boards that we sit on, so that we can make the appropriate decisions when it comes to us not only affect the residents of within the city limits, but also our extraterritorial zone, or ETZ. So I think it's a good idea to go over this, and our initial comprehensive plan had us growing to a city of 50,000. I don't think we're going to get there in this decade at least, but maybe down the road. But this will give us some better info. So I appreciate you guys, city staff, going ahead and doing the hard work and putting this in, and hopefully we'll get this grant and move forward. We have
Mr.
Do we need to
President?
approve that?
yes, we do.
I would move to approve the action plan.
Yeah, well, I think well, was that an action? Yeah, it was part of the proclamation. That's what I
Okay,
thought.
so,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I appreciate the enthusiasm.
You're welcome.
So, but we'll move into the public hearing this evening. First item up on the public hearing, we have some employee appreciation, and City Administrator Winningham, you have a couple of individuals you'd like to recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. I will defer my time to Fire Chief Presnell.
Thank you. President Decker and Commission, tonight we wanted to recognize 2 of our firefighters, Lieutenant Dustin Hoffer and firefighter Jared Rohde. They're the 2 that put together our high school fire academy, which kind of started prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then kind of got put on halt. And then in mid-December, we were approached by the high school saying, hey, we want to do this now. So we had about a month to kind of put this together, and they worked really hard on this and got a program together that's now being used across the state by other high schools and fire departments to start programs like this. We've actually had a couple of organizations out of Montana reach out to us wanting all the information on how we got this going. So we really wanted to recognize both of them for their commitment and dedication to just getting this program going. It was really great. So, Lieutenant Hoffer and Firefighter Rohde.
I have a few comments. This is what, when I spoke today at the Stark Development Luncheon about creating a regional training center, and this is exactly what I have in mind, because we have the expertise in this city. We have just the amount of knowledge between our staff that we have. I have no doubt in my mind that we can fire up a regional training center and put the people to work, have the instructors that are necessary to be a world-class between our fire department, our police department, our public works. We have the expertise. And we need to acknowledge that we have the potential to become one of the individuals or a city that's out at the forefront and leading the way in innovative training. Between our regional training center, between the Dickinson CTE Center, there's just so much potential. And we just need to have the intestinal fortitude to drive this forward and get it done. But congratulations, gentlemen. I had no doubt that you'd be able to do it. I'm not going to take a whole lot of credit for Mr. Hoffer or Lieutenant Hoffer, but I did recruit him at one point, put him. I started his career in the military anyway, and I think he's turned out okay. Saw the potential back then. He's a great leader in the National Guard, and I know he's a great leader within your department. And Firefighter Rohde, I know you do an exceptional job. So I appreciate all you guys' hard work, as do all the firefighters. Like I said, between what we have as a staff is amazing. The amount of knowledge that they have, and I have no doubt that we can harness that and like I said, become a regional powerhouse when it comes to training individuals. So, and you come up with this innovative stuff. I mean, we just had a discussion the other day, Mr. Winningham and I, with an individual within the city about all the innovative things that have started in the city of Dickinson. I mean, Mrs. Soboluk, she knows. Her dad was one of the great innovators in the city. We have TMI, we have Baker Boy, we have KMM, we have Amber Waves. Just so many different, examples of the innovative and entrepreneurial, they lead the way across the world. And it's coming out of here, out of Southwest North Dakota. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for your hard work. Commissioners, anything else? Two gentlemen?
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
thank you very much.
Decker, one thing I did fail to mention was about a week before the class actually started, we had about 3 students, which they did all the work for 3 students. With the help of the rest of the team we have at the fire department, they put together kind of a recruitment video that they shot at the fire station that Fire Marshal Selly actually spliced together, and we sent it out, and we went from 3 to, I think, total in the class when we started was approximately 18, 19. And then we just found out that we have another 19 for next year. So we're ready to go.
Wow, that's
Well done.
amazing. Good job. And get these young men and women started early, working in their communities. Great thing. So,
Mr. President, I want to point out that for Firefighter Rohde, that's certificate number 2 in the last couple months, so I haven't tied that to like free coffee or something, but it's noticed. Well done, both of you.
we appreciate your hard work. We really do. So, thank you very much. This is the public comment section, so we'll move on to the public hearing for the municipal code amendment on tobacco, and that will be presented by City Attorney Winko.
Mr. President, Commissioners, before you have ordinance identified as 1708, which is the second reading for the changes and the amendments to the tobacco ordinance for the city code. Just for clarification, this only pertains to the licensing requirements of the licensee. This does not restrict the individual who actually sells tobacco from being cited as a criminal infraction. I think that was one question that had recently come up. So please keep in mind that this amendment only applies to the licensee, not the individual that is selling the tobacco to the minor. This ordinance results from conversations that were had not only with Southwest District Health, but with also the tobacco retailers. It is a compromise based on staff recommendations as well as input from both groups, and the city staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Winko. Any questions for Mrs. Winko on 1708, ordinance 1708, which is?
I do.
Go ahead.
President Decker, I do have a question. So the first line states, or the first change line states, if the agent or the employee of the license possesses a tobacco server training at the time of the violation, they just receive a written warning. And as I was reading that, I just had some questions or concerns about that. If they've already had their training and they're still selling, is there any concern, or do we need them to be re-educated, or I don't know, when I was reading the alcohol license, there's something that they have to take the training every 3rd year. And is there any, would there be any benefit to making sure that there's further education than if they did make that mistake?
Commissioner Sobeluk, that was and is a mere requirement of the alcohol license. I believe what used to be the protocol, and I'll refer to the alcohol licensing requirement, is that the individual or the entity that was keeping track of those licensing requirements would track who in fact completed the training, and then in the event of a violation, city staff would look to that agency to confirm in fact whether that individual had the training and how long they had any, or if they had any additional violations. This would be a situation that in the event an employee is cited, we would look to see whether they were in compliance and they did have the server training. If not, then obviously the licensee would receive the violation or the fine. In the event that the employee was properly served or had the proper server training, then obviously that fine would be waived. There is a possibility, to answer your question, could an employee be responsible for selling multiple times and then still fall under that category of having the server training? It is very possible. That would be something that we would have to potentially look at if you are concerned with a continued employee continuing to exhibit behavior where they are in violation of the law. But that employee would still be cited and charged with a misdemeanor for selling tobacco to a minor. Again,
So just now tying the 2 points that you just shared together, so the point before my question and now, so the individual that sold the tobacco is still getting the fine of not following the law. So they'll get their personal fine of $150 or whatever that is set at, and then, but the employer doesn't get a fine if they have their training.
Correct, Commissioner Sobeluk. So regardless of, and I think you have to look at them as two different avenues. There's the issue with the employee, and then there's the issue with the employer licensee. Employee, in the event that they sell to a minor, is going to be cited as a Class B misdemeanor selling to a minor. That's a separate part of the city's code, and we deal with them in city court through the criminal process. Okay. Now, in the event that they are cited, simultaneously, there's going to be a situation where the licensee is going to see that report come across their desk that they've had an employee fail. And in that situation, the way that the code is currently structured is they would have to provide proof that that employee has passed the server training. If proof has been provided that they did pass, then they would receive a waiver of that fine. If they provide, or if they provide no proof that that employee has passed or even taken it, then the licensee is stuck with getting the initial administrative fine. If you want to go a step farther and say that, you know, that employee cannot have any other prior convictions or citations for selling to a minor, we can certainly go that far. But that's something that the commission would have to decide whether you feel it's warranted.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman.
Mrs. Wanko, you know, maybe along the same lines as Mrs. Sobeluk, maybe on a different branch of the same tree, but giving a lot of thought to this first offense, to me it seemed like we maybe got this backwards, I guess, at least from a philosophical standpoint here. If somebody has the training, they know that it's wrong to sell to that minor. I feel like that's the person that should be given the fine. And we should maybe have a 30-day probationary period where someone can get that training, to get that card or the license or the certificate to prove that, hey, I've gotten this training. Because, you know, if I'm new to the job and we do a compliance check on the third day that I'm on the job and I haven't had the training yet, why should I incur a $500 fine on my employer when someone that knows how to serve tobacco and sell it, that has gone through this training, just gets a written warning? Does that make sense where I'm going there?
Commissioner Oderman, I want to make sure I'm following you. So the person that actually sells the tobacco, the employee, the max penalty on that is 30 days in jail, a fine of $1,500, or both. That's a Class B misdemeanor.
Sure, yeah.
So the employee on the other side, who's responsible for making sure that their employees follow the law, they're responsible, and they, based on the code, would be required and dealing with the penalties of having an employee not follow the law. So that would be where we would assess the $500 fine. Now keep in mind, the way and the reason why this is being drafted this way is to mirror the current code requirements for the alcohol. And when we met and we visited with the tobacco retailers, and Chief Dossier can confirm here, they pushed for this. They wanted that in there as far as the waiver, essentially. So I think that you will see some pushback on that from the tobacco retailer group with regard to that. But ultimately, it's going to be your decision. We can certainly take it out if you feel that that's too much, or if you feel that that's not enough. I mean, that's the decision that you two or you all will have to make.
So is there a formal certification process for that tobacco training?
According to, I believe, the Southwest District Health, tobacco training is allowed, or I think it's provided online. I think it used to be provided locally, but now I think that there's a federal program, and I believe the ladies at Southwest District Health said that they would be willing to train given the circumstances, but again, I will not put words in their mouth. They can certainly speak to that.
I guess if we're going to have an ordinance like this where I just feel like somebody that has the actual training, that is, there should be a greater violation there in terms of the law. Because right now, if you say that you've got the training, or they can provide a certificate that shows that they've got this server training, they just get a written warning. It's a slap on the wrist. But if you're on
That's just the employer.
I understand that, but if you're, what I'm saying is that if I'm an employee,
Okay.
and I haven't had the opportunity yet to get the training, should I be facing a misdemeanor and my employer facing a $500 fine because I haven't had time, because I've been doing other orientation stuff on the job the first 3 days on the job?
Commissioner Oderman, to answer that question specifically, that's where we deal with prosecutorial discretion within my office to make that decision. I mean, we're going to look at that on a case-by-case basis. If we've got a situation where it's a first-time offender, a young individual who maybe have been on the job 3 days, we will take that into consideration as far as fines, fees, and penalties. But that's the discretion that we have at that time to make that call and make that decision, because every situation is going to be different. We may have a situation where this is the individual's third time selling to a minor, and obviously the penalty is going to be much more significant.
Yeah.
So we have some flexibility to deal with that on the criminal side of things.
Okay.
And just to play off this a little bit more, because I still am a little bit confused on, if I have training, or if we've trained everybody, but we're still selling to a minor, and then we just get a written warning, that means the education wasn't effective. And so I'm still confused on how.
Commissioner Stolbluck?
Yeah.
Yes, I completely understand what you're saying. I agree with you in the fact that, yes, if you think if your employee had training, then this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
But I guess the position that I was kind of taking from listening to the tobacco retailer groups is that they wanted to have some sort of benefit for having their employees having taken the training. So I think that it seems a little...
Because the training isn't mandatory.
Correct. That's going to be a decision that's obviously done through the employer-employer relationship. So certainly, like I said, and Chief can certainly back me up on this one, the discussion that we had, again, with the retailer group was they wanted, I don't use the word reprieve because that's not the correct word, but some sort of incentive for getting their employees properly trained. Now, granted, it shouldn't be happening if you're properly trained, but there are in some instances where it does.
Yeah, in a way, it disincentivizes it if there's a fine associated if you have training. I can see that. I can understand where they're coming from there. I don't know if I agree with it, but I see where they're coming from.
Repeat what you said, please.
Well, just the philosophical question I asked is why if they have a training, do they just get a written warning?
Uh-huh.
I understand the argument that if they have the training and there's a fine associated with that, that disincentivizes them getting the training, because if they didn't have the training, then they would just get a written warning. If you flipped it, like what I was asking, why it was structured the way it was. And maybe I'm just confusing the issue.
No. So, yeah, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that statement, but I
Yeah.
think I'm getting it.
Commissioner Norman, I think that's a very good point, said a different way, that it incentivizes tobacco retailers to train their employees, because in the event that an employee does get cited, there is the potential of a waiver of that fine.
Yes.
So on the other hand, if it was no waiver, then they would take the position, why do we even train our employees, because we're going to get stuck with a fine anyway.
Yeah.
So that is part of the mentality or the thought process with the tobacco retailer groups.
And even though the employer only receives a written warning, if let's say I'd sell tobacco and I work at a place, I would still get the misdemeanor.
Correct, because you're the one that's actually committing the violation.
But the employer would get waived on their fee because I've had the server training already.
Correct.
So for me personally, it still is in my best interest to not be selling to a minor, of course.
Correct.
And for the employer, it's in their best interest to get their employees trained, because if something happens, they have a little bit of protection.
Correct.
And there's an incentive for them to train their employee, because if their employee gets cited, they might be out an employee for up to 30 days. Is that what the...
I have never sentenced anyone to jail for 30 days for selling tobacco to a minor, but I mean...
But that is the max, is that the max?
It is
that is the max penalty, so I mean, that's a
I don't think the judge would ever
possibility.
do that, but that would be very extreme in that situation. But typically, just for your awareness, if we got a situation where it's an individual that's selling tobacco to a minor, it's a first offense, Usually it's deferred imposition of sentence. It's a small fine. You have to then complete the tobacco training as part of your plea. So there's, again, some wiggle room on that. And there herein lies a lot of discretion with the prosecutor's office on how to handle those situations. And we look every case on a case-by-case basis.
So this really just tells half the story in this. This is just the employer's side of the story, not
Correct.
the employee also. So there is more to this than
Correct.
this paragraph.
Yes, there's an entirely separate criminal subsection of the code dealing specifically with selling tobacco to a minor.
Any more comments, questions? Not, I'll open up the public hearing. If anyone has any comments on this ordinance 1708, please come forward, state your name. If you're watching online, please call in to 701-456-7006.
The conference is currently empty. You will hear silence or music on hold when connected.
Thank you. You can.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, President Decker, commissioners, and staff. I am Danielle Romanishin. I work with Tobacco Prevention Program at Southwestern District Health Unit. I am here to give a brief overview of our program. Our program follows CDC best practices, which are evidence-based guidelines for implementing interventions proven to be effective and reduce tobacco use. The four main goals are preventing tobacco use initiation among youth and young adults, promote quitting among adults and youth, eliminating exposure to secondhand smoke, and to identify and eliminate tobacco-related disparities. The most effective community intervention are those preventing tobacco use initiation. In 2018, the U.S. Surgeon General officially declared e-cigarettes among youth an epidemic in the United States. According to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey of 2019, the North Dakota high school tobacco use rate is 35.5%. 90% of all adult smokers begin while they're in their teens or earlier, and 2/3 become regular daily smokers before they reach the age of 19. Lifetime smoking and other tobacco use almost always begins by the time a youth graduates from high school. Some brief history on Dickinson's Youth Access Ordinance. It went into place around 2002, and compliance checks, they are recorded back to 2005. Compliance checks were done in conjunction with Southwestern District Health Unit, law enforcement, and a trained student ages 14 to 17. The ordinance at that time included training that was provided by Southwestern District Health Unit to all tobacco retailers. Those that attended the training were given a certificate card that was good for 2 years. With that certificate, the employees were not given a fine if they sold to a minor during a compliance check. Updates were worked on with the city attorneys and administrators over the years to combat underage sales, underage clerks, child-resistant packaging, and adherence to state and federal laws regarding tobacco. In 2017, the FDA launched a campaign called This Is Our Watch. This was to provide retailers and employees free online training, and at that time the local ordinance was removed. They removed the in-person training done at the health unit. The Tobacco Prevention Program sent letters to inform all of the retailers of this free online program and the changes in the local ordinance. Meetings in person were going to be set up through the city administrator at that time, which did not happen. But in the meantime, the health unit has continued mailings to update the retailers of any changes, and they give us phone calls all the time of any concerns or questions they have throughout the years. In 2019, the legal age to purchase tobacco was raised to 21 at the federal level. Again, letters were sent to all retailers explaining the immediate change in federal law and reminded of the free online training. Studies have shown that youth access laws successfully reduce youth tobacco use when they are well enforced to ensure a high rate of compliance. Enforcement of restriction against sales to minors is critical to minimizing the accessibility of tobacco products and ultimately reducing youth tobacco use. Retailers are the first line of defense when it comes to youth and tobacco use. Following CDC's best practices to prevent tobacco use among youth, we would not be in favor of removing the violation on the first offense for selling tobacco to a minor and the retailer not having a day of suspension. Therefore, we would not supply a certificate that would allow a pass to those who sell to a minor. Thank you for your time. I'd be open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Romanishin. Any questions?
I do have a question. What was that pass that you were talking about at the end? I didn't understand what that last statement that you made
The
about.
pass,
the
or
pass.
instead of getting, President Decker and Commissioner Sobolik, the pass would be a written warning instead of a violation. So we would not be in favor of that being a pass because indeed they're still sold to a minor.
I thought you provided them with the pass. I'm really,
Oh,
I misunderstood that one.
Oh.
I apologize.
there's taking the class, they would get a certificate of completion, and that certificate would count as a pass if they were to
Sure,
sell.
sure.
So
I
they
understand what you're
would,
saying.
there has been times during compliance checks that some have had that certificate and they'd be like, oh, just wait, I'll go get that. And then they get a warning instead of a violation. And that would not follow CDC best practices for preventing youth of getting tobacco.
Are there any other questions?
So I have a follow-up question I don't know, for Chief Dotsinger or, I'm not sure which, or Attorney
I
Winkle.
know he wants it.
No, so, if I was working somewhere and you guys came in for a compliance check and I sold tobacco to a minor, then I could run to the back and you wouldn't cite me at all right away, or it's just the employer doesn't get cited?
You would get cited. The
Okay.
employer-
Okay,
Can't get away.
thank you. I just keep getting busted here. I'm in trouble tonight. I have no further questions, thank you.
Mrs. Romanishin, the one sheet you provided us, the data sheet,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any data for just Dickinson or Southwest North Dakota? 'Cause this is pretty general. This is the whole state.
President Decker, I believe I can find for our region, not specifically for the city, but I
Okay.
can for the region of Southwest North Dakota.
Because you guys are, to a certain extent, kind of at the mercy of which schools allow you to enter in to take those surveys, correct?
President Decker and Commissioner Oderman, that is correct.
Okay.
There's certain schools, and I'm not sure the guidelines or policies of what they can release or not but I can check into that and at least get the regional numbers.
Yeah, if you could get us something for here specific.
Okay.
But thank you, though, for the testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. President, for the month of January, we had one tobacco citation. That was not a retail, but that obviously a lot of the tobacco violations occurs in a school setting. We had one violation.
Is there anyone else that has any comments on ordinance 1708?
Just a quick comment. Tracy Tews with Lucky's Liquor and Lucky's Convenience. We do agree with how Dossinger and everybody put it together about finding the employee. The one thing that we do disagree with is the closure. Not only does it take tax revenue that day from the city of Dickinson, it takes revenue from us. And if we've trained our employee, they still yet sometimes have these infractions either on the liquor side or the tobacco side. So we disagree with the closure. We'd rather see the fine go up than a closure because it is lost revenue to the city tax roll.
Any questions for Mr. Tews or comments?
No, in this situation, we're just talking about the suspension of the license, correct? they don't necessarily have to close their doors, but I mean, I guess if you're,
Suspension of the tobacco license.
Tobacco
Correct.
license,
You
yeah,
cannot
yeah.
sell tobacco products for
Sure.
1 day, 3 days, 5 days.
yeah, okay.
I thought there's no suspension in selling unless they're on the second offense.
Second and third.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
0, 1.
0,
3
1,
is
3.
how it's currently
Right.
stated.
Yes.
It's tobacco products, so. Is there anyone else with comments on 1708?
President and Commissioners, my name is Karen Goyne, and I actually have worked in the behavioral health field for over 45 years. And I've kind of worked on the treatment side, and I know that we have very few resources for treatment, so we really want to focus on the prevention side, and that's what we do at Public Health. And so I have certainly worked more with alcohol, and so I understand that we're putting this ordinance in to follow the alcohol ordinance, which I understand, and I understand the incentivization and all of that kind of thing. The only concern that I would have as well is getting that pass for the owner. I'm thinking that there should be an incentivization for behavior well done. So if the employees don't sell and are getting the message from their employer that they need to take these training classes and do the things that they need to follow and how important it is for them to follow, then maybe they should be given some other incentivization. Maybe when their license renewal is up, they get some type of discount for passing all of their compliance checks. So to me, that rewards positive behavior rather than incentivizing possible negative behavior on the side of the employer as well, because we really do need to encourage accountability all across the board. And I have no problem incentivizing positive, well-earned behavior.
Mr. President, anyone who is up to date on the fee schedule, what is the renewal of a tobacco license each year? $50? All right. I was going to say I really agree with Mrs. Goyen's approach there, but you know, $50. It's hard to say, hey, we're going to give them a financial incentive for $50. So yeah, but if it's only $50, maybe the financial incentive is that their renewal fee is waived. I really like that because it further incentivizes that employer to follow the law.
Well, and I think if we're looking to, and I get it, I understand, you know, you want to mirror one ordinance with alcohol and tobacco. It makes it a lot easier for law enforcement to kind of do what they need to do with it. So I'm not sure. I'm thinking it might be a little bit different on the licensing side for alcohol, you know, license renewal. So there might be some, I don't know how you would do that, you know, kind of thing, because I think their fees are much higher on the alcohol license renewal fee, but maybe they could be given a break the same way. So that's just my suggestion. Thank you. Any questions?
Mrs. Wanko, I don't want to create more work for you, but that might be
Commissioner Odom,
worth conversation.
Yes, I think it's a unique approach, one that I don't think that I had thought about, but I think that would require us to really look at one, and I think it doesn't create more work for me. It probably creates more work for the chief in actually having to, you know, do the compliance checks.
I was going to say, you actually have to do the compliance checks.
It's been difficult, I believe, from, you know, visiting with chief, that finding minors that are willing and able to do this, and so I think it's a very unique, creative way to do it. I think it's probably going to cause more staffing concerns of being able to actually implement than anything else.
Well, and reason I mention that is because we know statistically across the state of North Dakota, You know, we have within our high schools, you know, over half of our students are either vaping or, you know, drinking. And so, like you talked about earlier, how we want to talk about the health of our community, we really want to reduce our underage use of tobacco and drinking. And I think it's vital when you take a look at North Dakota is #1 in the nation as far as bars per population. We have 1 bar in the state of North Dakota for every 1,800 people. So if you take a look at that, we have a lot of bars in some of these places sell tobacco as well, that kind of thing. But we need to somehow get the message out that we have to do something to change the normalization in the community of where alcohol and tobacco is. That, you know, this is all these kids have to do and that kind of thing. And so I, you know, would like to see that we could kind of do a 180 on our process and, again, reward good behavior rather than bad behavior.
Mrs. Going, do you have like a municipality in North Dakota or in the region that you'd be able to share with us that does something like that? I seem to subconsciously think that maybe Grand Forks has something like that, where they have that in their city ordinances where you get a break on your renewals.
I'm not sure, because Grand Forks has worked more on the social host kind of thing in returns of alcohol. But I know that there are some communities, and I'd have to look at what communities those are, but some say that the insurance provider for the bars sometimes gives them a discount if they go through the responsible beverage server training and they pass their compliance checks, and so they get a reduction in their insurance. But I don't know if that's every insurance policy, you know, that offers that. But I know that some communities, and I believe Valley City and Jamestown may be one, that with the grants that they've gotten from the federal government, they have offered incentives to passing compliance checks or taking the responsible beverage server training or even confiscating an underage license. So, you know, I'm not sure if that is extended into the tobacco programs across the state, but I believe it is Jamestown and Valley City who have done some of those kinds of things. Anything else?
All right.
No?
Any other comments or questions for Mrs. Going? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? If you're watching online, you can call in 701-756-7006.
President Decker.
456. Excuse me. What did I say? Oh, 7. All right. 456. Nobody's calling.
President Decker, I hate to put Mr. Tooze on the spot here, but as the lone retailer in the room, I was wondering how do you feel about Mrs. Going's suggestion there? I know it's only $50, but
It's $50, but I mean, it's an incentive for us, and the training is really not that difficult to have all of our staff trained. And what we do on the liquor and the tobacco side is when we get a letter from Chief Dossinger saying that they passed, they get incentives within our business. So we do incentivize within our own business, and it's a little more than $50. So,
yeah, okay.
I mean, a couple of years ago, and Mr. Tooze probably remembers this, we tried to encourage all the liquor stores and the tobacco retailers. There's software you can install on their
point of sale,
on their the tills.
Yep.
That basically it will not operate the till unless you pulled the person's license. I mean, I know in South Dakota I've been to places like that. I mean, you have to. It doesn't matter how old you are. You have to hand them
you swipe the. Yeah.
You swipe it. It doesn't process unless it clears that. But you know, for some of these smaller retailers, it's tough for them to. You know, and I don't know what the software costs, $3,000-$4,000 plus the setup and everything, but in the long run, you think it would make it that much easier. It's just a habit then.
It does make it that much easier, and we do use it in our liquor stores and our convenience stores. You have to override the age, or you have to physically have a license to put in.
Right. So,
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment to that? I know that every year for the last probably 4 or 5 years, a letter has been sent out to all the people who have liquor licenses. And through public health, we do have ID scanners. And First on First is very good about using them on their events. But every liquor license holder in this region is notified that we have ID scanners that they can use at no cost. All they have to do is contact us, and they actually even will scan for the age. At point it was 18 for tobacco, but anyone could use them at no cost at all. And so we've tried to provide that for them to use to help them identify underage.
and that's a great tool.
Yeah.
What I was speaking to, it's actually
Yes, right on the
on the
register.
till, and the cashier, you know, they can't operate, they can't
Right.
complete the transaction unless they have that.
And unfortunately, I have heard and seen sometimes, and from meeting with other people, is that sometimes the person working the till will take their ID and scan it and then bypass it that way.
But I'm sure there's a log. Anything with a computer is there's a log. So if I was a business owner, I would be looking to see if there's a certain ID being scanned multiple times.
Yes. Thank you.
So, any other comments or questions? Anyone?
Mr. President, I hate to be the one that always asks questions, but Chief Dossinger, I'd be curious as to what kind of feedback you might have on this following the conversation here.
Well, I guess kind of the direction that we got from the commission originally was to, mirror it after the alcohol violations and maybe look at the harshness towards the retailer side of it. I feel that this ordinance is a good compromise. I think there's discussions we had with both the retailer side and with Southwestern District Health, and I think there's been multiple discussions even at the commission level regarding this, and I feel that this ordinance is a good compromise moving forward. The educational side of it, no matter how hard you educate people, there's still going to be violations. At least with the server training or the training portion of it, at least that business shows that they're taking the steps forward to make sure that their staff is properly trained. And if you have an employee that has multiple sales to minors, obviously that employee becomes more of a liability to the employer, and maybe that's not the best line of work for them.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Seeing no one else from the public, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any final questions or comments? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on 1708.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Oderman to approve 1708. Second by Commissioner Walla. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. This is the public hearing and public comments at 5 p.m. So if you have any public comments not on our agenda, please come forward, state your name. If you are watching online, you can call in at 701-456-7006. If you have any comments that were not on the agenda this evening or any concerns, please come forward, state your name. Anyone? Anyone with any public comments that were not on the agenda or any concerns? Or anyone? Seeing no one and hearing no one online has any concerns or public comments, that were not on the agenda. We'll close both. And we will go back to Administration and Finance. In the last item, we have a report by Risk Management, our 2020 annual report. Welcome, Mr. Beck.
President Decker, Commission members, thank you for allowing me to come in here tonight and give you an update as to how last year worked out for us. I want to start out this evening by talking a little bit about what my job duties are, because it's kind of a broad range when you talk risk management. So the first thing is that I go through, develop, implement, and maintain policies and programs to ensure health and safety compliance for our employees. I review and keep records of safety-related incidents, so I assist supervisors in incident management and give direction on employee and city asset protection. I watch for trends that are of concern. I provide and set up safety trainings. Most of these are determined by what I see in the trends that are going on, and plus also keeping in regards to the required courses that the federal government mandates employers put on for their employees. I deal with injured employee oversight. So I work with managers, doctors, and human resources to on the return to and light duty work details for an employee who does get injured on the job, because our number one priority is to get them back to work. I also assist employees with claims paperwork, which goes right into the next one, which is workforce safety and insurance claims management. Making sure incidents are reported so employees can receive proper medical attention and have insurance coverage at the time of the injury. If I get the information, I can have that employee put into their system within probably 5-10 minutes if I'm at a computer. I work with designated medical providers to determine the next course of action for that injured employee, which is the return to work policy. I also deal with damaged city property and resident property damage complaints. I work with insurance company providers to fix damaged property that it's damaged either by our own employees or citizens running over street signs. We also deal with, or I handle resident phone calls on personal property damages due to a city employee or city provided services. The biggest one on this list is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration compliance. I administered the quarterly random drug and alcohol screening policies. I track employee driver's license and medical examination records to make sure that all of our drivers are in compliance and they're up to date. I deal with post-accident and reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol testing. I'm on call 24/7, and most of the time when I get a phone call, it's about what they need to do next. Or it may be that I need to go in and meet an employee at one of our designated medical providers to sit with them and make sure that they're going to get the care that they need. Or just to basically let them know that the city cares and we're there for them. The last one is property insurance. I work with accounting closely to maintain insurance policies on all of the city properties. And when we update our facilities, we have to follow up with paperwork to show that for the insurance companies. Let's go to the next one. Part of risk management is trending. And what they recommend is at minimum 5 years of trending data to look back on. So in the top graph, you can see that we are going from 2016 through 2020. Our reported incidents for 2020 were down 3 from 2019 for a total of 51. Basically, that puts us trending right in the middle of where we where we've been at in the last 5 years. If we look at this, our trending goal for 2021 is to beat the 2018 recorded incident record. And honestly, we are on a good path for that right now. At the end of January in 2020, we had 7 recorded incidents or accidents, and at the end of January 2021, we only had 2. So if we can maintain that, we should just blow by that record. If you look at the bottom graph, there were no large spikes in any one given category, and that's what we like to see.
Mr. Beck?
Yes.
The last couple of years, 19 and 20, and property damage,
Yes.
we did trend upward.
Yes, and actually I'll be covering that coming up in the next
Okay.
screen. So, in the second quarter, we had a large spike in with medical incidents. The reason for that is that we had 2 emergency service calls that accounted for 6 individual incidents. 3 of them were a pathogen exposure, and the other 3 were inhalation hazards that for an environment that they were in. Third and fourth quarters had a reduced number of with medical incidents. These quarters actually had less with medical claims than the prior year of 2019. And the best thing about this graph is that we had no lost time injuries in 2020. So that's a good accomplishment. We did have a spike in first, third, and fourth quarters for property damage. A lot of our property damage involved our large vehicles maneuvering within tight areas and backing. So on the next screen, you'll see what we're talking about as far as the vehicle side. Motor vehicle incidents, numbers stayed the same, but we did have more vehicle-to-vehicle collisions than the prior year. So basically our graph flipped from 2019.
Mr. Beck, on the property damage, is that other vehicles, or is it buildings, or is it a mixture of the two?
It's a mixture.
Okay.
On that previous screen, it's a mixture of all the different aspects of property damage. It could have been, somebody backed into a house, or something happened on a pipe, a pipe replacement or something like that. So,
okay.
But as far as the motor vehicle side, that's the information we have there for 2020. We're going to talk a little bit about the years of service, because this is one area that in the safety industry we like to ensure that we're within our general industry standards. For us as a municipality, we don't report to OSHA, so there is no category for us. So my comparisons go against what the OSHA's general industry considerations. The positive thing to take away from the 2 graphs from 2019 to 2020 was that our 0 to 1 year employees, the percentage went down by 7%. And that is a trend we like to see. In fact, I'd like to see it keep dropping, because that is our most at-risk group for workplace injuries and fatalities. And I believe, honestly, that this is due to supervisors, managers, and chiefs taking the time to train their employees a little bit closer. I get a lot of phone calls saying, hey, what can I do to train an individual to do this job? So we sit down, we work out details, and they do the talking to that employee. We did have a slight increase in the 1 to 5 year and 6 to 10 year service employees. The 1 to 5 year, it was mainly vehicle related and emergency service calls. The 6 to 10 year was the fall or slip injuries, vehicle related, and emergency related exposures. What were our obstacles in 2020 as far as risk management is concerned? The number one thing was incident paperwork turnaround times. It was taking too many days to get incident paperwork turned in for review and reporting purposes, which goes right into the next one, which is reporting to workforce safety insurance. 2020 was our second and the worst year of the last 6 years for penalties paid. Last year, we paid out $2,000 in late reporting penalties due to paperwork not being filed timely for the with medical injuries or for injuries that were not recorded as an incident in WSI's incident reporting software. And the employee later on sought medical attention for that injury. So basically what that comes down to is an individual hurts themselves on Tuesday, and Wednesday they start feeling it, and Thursday they go seek medical attention. If I don't have a report in, that's a penalty. So in the last 6 years, we have paid out over $9,500 in late reporting penalties. So this is one area that we're working on diligently to fix, because that's money that doesn't need to be spent. Employees not getting proper medical treatment for their injuries is another deal that we saw this year. When I'm not made aware, I'm not a doctor by any means, but I know what needs to be done to make sure that employee gets the proper medical attention.
Mr. Beck, what would you chalk that up to? Is that just like the old school mentality of rub some dirt on it and I'll go back to work, and they end up in the hospital later on?
Yes, a little bit of that. Some of it's just that paperwork ends up sitting on a manager's desk and they don't get to it for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden I get it and it's 5 days later. Because we have a 24-hour turnaround time on getting this reported to WSI, either in the incident management reporting or for a first report of injury, which means that individual did seek medical attention at that time. So,
thank you.
What are our 2021 risk management goals? Obviously, number one on my list is that we need to figure out a way to do faster reporting times on injuries and incidents. I've been told by many different individuals that our current system is quite cumbersome due to the paperwork filing and the turnaround and all that. So we are looking at some other options potentially to expedite this, where we can fill in some of the blanks and get this stuff turned around quicker and reports done. The other thing that has to be done here in 2021 is that we have to update the drug and alcohol policy to match the new requirements of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which goes into effect on January 1st, 2022. So you will be seeing me later on this year once we get those items Our 2021 long-term goals: utilizing the learning management system from WSI. Last year, the last 6 weeks of 2020, Deputy Administrator Carlson and I decided we're going to try and get some of our mandatory trainings in that way. And we've seen that with the help of supervisors, managers, and chiefs and employees working together, we could push this through and get an additional 5% discount, which as of today, I actually just got the paperwork of what our premium would be, and it would have been a savings of just about $10,000. So thanks, Deputy Carlson, for helping me push that through. The other one is creating facility-specific inspection forms. Both our insurance provider, NDERF, or North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, and WSI state that we are a little weak. Obviously, it's coming from two different sides, because WSI is looking after the employees, and NDERF is looking after our facilities. So one of the goals I've got is to get that paperwork process started, where I'm going to go out and build each facility their own inspection forms, and they will do those on a monthly basis. and then I will follow up on a quarterly basis to ensure that they're actually doing a thorough inspection. And the final thing for tonight is the hazard communication standard. Right now, I know a couple facilities have it, but if you take into consideration like Public Works, the big building, there's several different divisions out there, and a lot of chemicals that have to be dealt with specifically in areas. So we need to get a plan put together to protect our employees at that point so that they know what to do if there's a spill or an exposure. So I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Any questions for Mr. Beck on his annual risk management report? Question? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, next item up is public safety, and we'll have a report, a January monthly report from Police Chief Dossinger from the Dickinson Police Department.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. I have before you to present the January 2021 monthly report. I want to give you a synopsis of the activity that we've seen for the month. We've seen 1,939 calls for service. We are slightly down from what we've seen in last January. Our top 5 monthly calls, we responded to 82 suspicious person or vehicle calls, 65 warrant services, 62 traffic crash responses, 62 speak with an officer calls, and 46 welfare checks. Accident numbers for the month, we had a total of 62 total accidents reported to us. That is down from 104 from last year. Obviously, we benefited from Mother Nature for the month of January with the road conditions. We've had 3 injury accidents for the month, 3 last year at the same time, and we had 17 hit and run related accidents for the month. There were a total of 472 traffic stops made, 259 warnings issued, and 131 citations issued. The top 5 cited traffic violations for the month, there were 45 speeding violations cited, 22 no liability insurance, 18 failure to register motor vehicles, 13 care required, and 6 stop sign violations that were cited. There are a total of 133 criminal arrests or criminal citations issued for the month. Some of the more common ones were warrant services, drug-related calls, DUI refusals, and theft and fraud calls were the most prevalent arrests for the month. Police response, we assisted the Dickinson Ambulance Service on 61 calls, and we assisted the Dickinson Fire Department on 27 fire calls for service. Behavioral health calls, we had a total of 65 total calls for service. 46 of those were welfare checks, 8 mental health calls, 6 intoxicated subject calls, and we responded to 5 suicidal threats in the month. Our criminal investigative unit opened up 36 new cases. There were 4 incidents in which they were called out after hours. The new Dakota Children's Advocacy Center satellite office is now open and has been used by our investigations. This definitely increases our opportunity to have children interviewed in a forensic setting. So it's a very nice resource that's now open in our community. Staffing-wise, we're allocated to have 43 sworn positions. We currently have 3 open positions, 4 in the FTO process, 2 at the academy, 3 in military deployment, and 1 in extended medical leave in January. We also have 1 position open in our dispatch center that has not been filled. So staffing-wise, we had a very depleted bench in the month of January. Patrol coverage, our day shift runs from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., our night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and then as you can see, during day shift, we require a minimum staffing of 4. during days, and 67% of the time we operated with that minimum number for the month of January. Night shift, we were operated at 57% of the time at minimum. Our peak hours is from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. for calls for service. At that time, our minimum staffing level was 5. We used to have the requirement for both day shift and night shift to also have the minimum staffing at 5, but there was no way we can meet that requirement with their current staffing. Overtime expenditures for the month of January, there's a total of 132.25 hours worth of overtime. The majority of that went to a tactical team call-out. That was 1 call in Billings County, and the other one was our dispatch center, and I'll touch on that here shortly. There's 2 overtime expenditures on there that we get reimbursement back. One is our tactical team. That 32% was reimbursed to us from a call-out because it occurred outside of our city limits in Billings County, and we are a regional response team. The other one is the ICAC overtime, which is the Internet Crimes Against Children. We are reimbursed for the hours that investigator puts into those calls. Our dispatch center fielded 656 911 calls for the month. They fielded 4,534 non-emergency calls, and there was 1,136 outbound calls. Those are calls in which they've had to transfer calls to another agency or to make calls to other non-emergency related departments. Dispatch update, as you know, we're going through the siren update. So we have the new radio consoles were installed. That project went fairly smooth. We are currently implementing the first step in the Dickinson Stark County dispatch to be online with the new North Dakota statewide interoperability radio network siren. So that equipment is installed in our dispatch center. And the upgrade to the second computer-aided dispatching network is complete now on all 4 stations. So. Currently, we are short 1 full-time communication specialist. There are 2 tenured communication specialists that are going to be retiring in the next 2 months. If all hires complete training this year that we currently have on staff, 7 out of the 14 dispatchers will have less than 2 years of experience. So we're very young in our dispatch center at this time. Kind of give you a look at what the animal control looks like right now. For the month of January, we impounded 28 dogs. 12 had been released to a rescue organization to find adoption, and 16 of those impounded dogs were returned to their owners. There were 18 impounded cats, 8 released to a rescue to find a new home for them, 5 returned to the owner, 2 were adopted out at the shelter, and 3 are currently at the shelter. There were a total of 79 animal calls for the month. The majority of them were running at large calls, 45 of those. Kind of some of the hurdles moving forward for my department right now and for the community. Obviously, Mr. Winningham had touched on this already, but the volume of the mental health and drug and alcohol related calls is continually increasing in our community. And I guess the lack of the resources in our community in Southwest North Dakota to deal with these is definitely an issue. And I certainly ask you, if you have the opportunity to visit with area legislatures about this problem, to take the opportunity for our advantage. So, are there any questions?
Thank you, Chief Dossinger. Any questions for Chief Dossinger?
Mr. President.
Mr. Oderman.
Chief Dossinger, on those behavioral health calls, you said, according to the report, there were 65 total calls for service. How does a call like that compare to, breaking out the behavioral health calls? How much of a time commitment are those compared to your guys' other calls?
They're very time consuming, depending on the call, but oftentimes it takes, we have to transport them to the hospital, basically for a review. Oftentimes we have to basically spend time at the hospital with this individual. So there's times that these calls can take in excess of 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And depending on the behavior of that individual, it may tie up more than one officer. And then from there, sometimes we have the transport time in which they have to be transported to potentially the Southwest Multi-County Correctional Center. Or if they are a juvenile, sometimes we'll actually have to call in another individual, and then we'll have to transport them outside of Dickinson to a location.
So how would that compare to like your other calls that you might have? Like your average call time, any idea on what that would be?
Depending on the call, but obviously these type of calls are much more time intensified and require much more follow-up. Depending on the call, if it's a theft call, degree of the theft call, or if it's a traffic crash, a lot of those calls you can finish up, in less around 20, 25 minutes, depending on the call and severity.
Okay. And then on the staffing side of things, what's the what's the big hurdle there for you guys?
I think right now, obviously staffing-wise, obviously we have open positions that have been very difficult to fill recently. There's not a whole lot of people looking to getting involved in the criminal justice field, becoming police officers right now. I think that's the national trend. We're competing with most of the agencies, not only in southwestern North Dakota, but up in the upper Midwest for talented individuals that want to be police officers. We're certainly getting applications. If I wanted to be filled tomorrow, I could be. But we are looking for individuals that would make good law enforcement officers for the city of Dickinson. Individuals that have a good solid background, good moral aptitude, and can make good decisions. Obviously, we've had a lot of individuals that are currently at the academy right now, or through the FTO process. The FTO process is a very time-intensified process, which requires a lot of manpower to train them as well, in those extents. And competition-wise, we're having a tough time competing for talent right now with basically our current salary and the benefit package. And right now we have a very difficult time competing with other agencies in our backyard for that. And we're going to be losing one individual here in March that's going to work for North Dakota BCI for a decent-sized pay increase and a very good officer. And we're coming to the point where we're starting to become a training ground for other agencies again.
And this overtime expenditures of 132.25, that's for the month?
That's for the month, yes. Okay. And, it's a little bit misleading as far as a minimum staff coverage of 2%. So basically, 2% of the overtime for that time period, we had to bring other people in to meet minimum staffing. But if we had more of a bench, a lot of that other training or a lot of that other overtime could have been scrubbed off by rescheduling hours worked as well.
With your new officers that you have that are under a certain length of tenure or experience, do you have officers that are currently in like a training mode with those officers, the kind of the rookies that you might have on your force?
Yes. So as a new hire, you're assigned basically an FTO officer, and that's basically an individual in our departments that's been to a field training officer school. So that field training officer instructor is basically assigned to that new recruit for up to 12 weeks. And we have a very in-depth training process, documentation process that goes with that. So it's, if you're currently underneath FTO, you're not considered as manpower. So you're not considered an asset at that point in time until you've completed your FTO program.
So you got 4 officers that aren't on the bench yet. They're not even able to necessarily be thrown out on the field on their own yet.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there any other questions for Chief Dossinger?
Is the picture of the cat that you have on the animal control slide, is that representative of the cats that you guys impound? He looks pretty happy.
Looks pretty happy there. Well, I'm sure they're pretty happy right now with the cold temperatures.
Yeah.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments, thank you, Chief Dossinger. We'll move into engineering. First item up is our East Broadway Dam City Project 202108, Phase 1 contract with BAR. And City Engineer Marshik, you'll be handling this.
President Decker, Commissioners, before you is a contract with BAR for the Phase 1 of the East Broadway Dam project. This initial phase of work covers data collection, alternative concept designs, and a 30% design of the selected alternative. This dam is considered a low-head dam, which creates dangerous conditions for persons utilizing this area for recreation. We know it's in need of maintenance, but we don't know the degree of deterioration. So this phase will help us determine the best route for updating this dam and the associated costs with that alternative for renovating the structure. The contract is invoiced at a standard hourly rate with a not to exceed amount of $65,196.50. Engineering staff recommends approval of the contract with BAR. Do you have any questions for me on this item?
Are there any questions? I guess I have a few, if no one else does. At one point, the concept was to not rehab this dam and possibly open that up. I remember that was presented to us as one option at one time.
And that is one possible option. What they've done with other dams like this in our area has been something that's a little more recreational, so it still keeps the water elevation upstream at a point so you can keep it recreational uses, but allows people to it eliminates the dangerous currents behind the dam. So, and it allows fish to move through it, and it's more of a recreational feature. That's another option. We don't know if we want to fix the dam, if it needs completely redone, does it need can we get by with renovation? You know, there's different costs associated with that, and that would be something that they'll look at this phase.
Well, I know I mentioned it at that time, if there's no solution to move water in that, we will have a 2-foot wide creek because there is no water flow along the heart there except for spring runoff. And unless we possibly, and I know I mentioned this, Mr. Off, divert where we're dumping water now into the river and dump it on the other side of Patterson, so that you actually create flow on our where our pipeline comes across going over to the refinery on the heart. We'd actually put water in there to create flow. Those millions of gallons we're dumping into the heart right now, if they come back with we're gonna, you need to take this thing down, it's beyond rehab, we're gonna have a 2-foot wide creek running through the middle of Dickinson. So there is no water flow. There's nothing that comes out of Patterson. Except for, and nothing's gonna come out this year. There's no snow. So I'm gonna be surprised if there's gonna be water in the lake. So
we've had some of those conversations with the contractor or the BAR. So they'll bring forward some different ideas to present to you as a commission, and then we can have more discussion if you have other ideas, and then we can go from there. So that's why this contract is phased the way it is. So it gives us a starting point. It'll help us get some estimates to help with budgeting, and give us a stepping stone to go forward on this project.
And this wasn't something we put out an RFP on, right?
It was in last year's 2020 RFP. That's how they were chosen.
Okay. I guess I don't remember.
It's been a while.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners, on this? I have one. Is this eligible for any kind of federal
It is.
or water through the state
There's
project?
some grants through State
Okay.
Water Commission, so we'll actively be looking to get
Well,
move
there's-
forward with those. I had found some documentation that looks like we maybe have put our name on the list already for this dam. So I have to follow up with that and see if I can find out if that actually happened and where we're at. But there's quite a few grants out there for these types of dams.
I was going to say, even just statewide in those 3 legacy funding bills that have been proposed, there's a ton of money out there again for water. So we need to see if we qualify for any of that, because it would stretch our dollars a little bit farther. Okay, any other questions on this contract with BAR?
I'd move to approve this Phase 1 contract with BAR.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the contract with BAR by Commissioner Sobeluk, second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions? Comments? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Carries. Next item up, Public Works. We have an Apex task order with the Water Reclamation Facility for process control assistance. Mr. Zuroff?
Thank you, President Decker and Commission. This task order is to provide on-call services, technical assistance for the Water Reclamation Facility. Apex Engineering was the original design consultant for this plant. We had a similar task order when the plant started, and we used them for the first couple of years of getting the plant started and moving in the right direction. Recently, the startup of the renewable diesel plant with Marathon, we're working with them on startup and using soybean for the feed at the plant, which they're having some difficulties in working with them on different process control. Working with Marathon along with recent turnover at the plant, we feel a need that we have Apex again available for technical assistance for our operations and help us with the technical side of things, along with operations advice, process analysis, and other recommendations with equipment, things like that. So I do have this budgeted in our 2021 budget. We've continued to have that available as a line item for this need. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Zuroff. Any questions from Mr. Zuroff on this task order? This is task order 2021-2. If there are no questions or comments from Mr. Zuroff, I'd look for a motion on 2021-2.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sobeluk,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
That should, we have nothing in planning, building and codes. Commissioners, item 10. This is the commission moment. If there anything you wish to discuss that was not on the agenda this evening, please bring that forward for discussion. Nothing this evening? Hearing nothing, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We are adjourned.